Okay, hi Ish. So, okay, now let's talk about the next question. I think which is mentioned by you that with respect to release planning and scheduling, right? So, as a Scrum Master, how I am responsible for release schedule and milestones, and as a Scrum Master, how I have to keep up with the high velocity in the fast-paced environment. So that was something that was asked in your previous interview which you are not able to answer. Okay, so see what I'll do, I'll break this answer maybe into two or three parts. So I am going to explain in detail the process with respect to Scrum Master, which maybe few people already know, but then I'm also going to give you the technical developers perspective, like what exactly these people do when this release is going to happen, and what will happen if a issue will going to arise in the release when we're going to deploy something into the production. So I will explain you every step, so even any fresher can understand. Okay, so let me take a scenario that will be better. So let's say assume that you are working as a scrum master in a company that provide shipping and logistics solutions to the client globally. So let's take an example of FedEx. Let's call it FedEx. Now the company use Scrum to develop and enhance its software platform, which manage various different aspects of the international shipping operations. Now, in this kind of projects, or in this kind of uh, domain, when we talked about logistic and shipping, right? So there are two main challenges. The very first challenge is that this international shipping industry is highly regulated, and their regulations change frequently. Now, this requires the software to adapt quickly to the compliance changes. So that is the very first challenge, that frequent changes, right? And the second is this software caters to the various users. So they include shippers, carriers, custom agents, and warehouse operators. So each will have their unique requirement. So the complex user requirement, the complex user base is again a challenge. Now, what is your responsibility as a Scrum Master? So I'll tell you in a brief these steps, because these steps are, I think, most of the time people know them. But I'm going to emphasize is most on the second part. Okay. So the very first thing which you are going to do, of course, the release planning. So you work closely with the product owner and the stakeholders to plan the complete release. Now you will you along with your product owner, you will prioritize the features based on their urgency, customer feedback, and the regulatory changes. So this you are going to do in a release planning along with your product owner or product manager, let's say. Now, during the sprint planning, of course, you will facilitate the sprint planning meeting with your Scrum team, with the quality analyst, with the UX designer, and definitely you are going to help them to break down this complex features or the user stories into the smaller and manageable tasks. Of course, all those planning poker thing will come into picture over here, right? And as a Scrum Master, you have to ensure that the sprint goal is aligned with the release milestone. So that's something important which you should remember. Now, the next thing is you will continuously monitor the team velocity, and you have to make sure that it is consistent and sustainable, right? So if your velocity drop for whatever reason, so you have to investigate, right, along with your team, the reason. So you can do the retrospective, and you can come up with the workaround. You will work with your team to address any challenges, impediments, and issues, right? Now, when the new international shipping regulations are introduced, right? So you, along with your team, you will quickly assess their impact on the software, and then you will collaborate with the team to adjust their priorities, and then you have to help them, and you have to expedite the necessary changes to maintain the compliance. Now, of course, there will be different teams are involved. So you will encourage the close collaboration between your developers, your quality analyst, your product analyst, or your business analyst, and your UX designer. So you have to make sure that they have a shared understanding of the user requirements, and they should work together and seamlessly. Now you will also going to assist your product owner in managing the product backlog. So you will ensure that it contains the items that are well defined, prioritized, and ready for the upcoming sprints. And then we'll talk about risk. So you will proactively identify and manage risk along with your team that could affect the release schedule. So you work with your team to come up with the contingency plan if any unforeseen issues will happen in the future. So this is from a Scrum Master perspective. Now let's understand from the developer's perspective. That's, I think, something which most of the time we will not spend much time. So what will happen? The very first thing which is going to happen from a developer's perspective, that after selecting the user stories for the sprint, developers further break down those stories into smaller manageable tasks or subtasks, right? So they might have tasks that include coding, testing, code review, documentation, and any other necessary activities. Now, this detailed breakdown helps in better planning and tracking of work. So, as a Scrum Master, you have to ensure that the user stories have to be break down into a manageable or small subtasks. Now, the development will happen, right? So, developer begin coding. They will build the features, or they will make changes to the existing code base. Now, they follow different coding standards, best practices, and possibly they will engage in the pair programming or any code review, so to ensure that the code quality has been maintained. So as a scrum master, you make sure that all these things should happen, right, parallelly. Now we'll talk about testing. So now your quality analyst, right, they work in parallel with the developers to write test cases, and they have to ensure that the new features or the changes do not introduce the defects. That's the important thing. Now, developer may also perform unit testing to catch and fix issues early. That's also something which you will work along with your team. Now, the next important thing which is there is continuous integration and testing. So, developers frequently integrate their code into a shared code repository using a version control system. Normally, we use, let's say, Git, right? Now, the other thing is they will do the automated build, and then they do the continuous integration. So this process ensures that the code changes do not break the existing functionality. So that's again an important step, right? So all these automated tests which are executed so that they validate that the new feature work as expected and do not negatively impact the existing functionality. So that's the something which we should take care of. Now testing also happen, right? So what will happen after testing? The code review will happen. So now this code review again is an important step when developers review each other code for quality, adherence to coding standards, or the guideline which you as a team has set up in the beginning, right? And maybe the potential bugs. So that's the importance of code review. Now this code review helps to maintain the code consistency and improve the overall quality of your code base. Now the next step, which again lot of people don't know if you are not work into actual project, is the staging environment setup or staging environment testing. There are a lot of names. So before moving changes to production, right, developers deploy their code to a staging or a pre-production environment that is closely mimics the production environment. Basically, it's kind of replica of the production environment. All the data, everything is somewhere same like a production environment. Now the testing in this environment ensures that the code behave as expected in a real world setting. So that was the expectation. After this staging thing, we have something called UAT. So in some cases, developers or maybe BAs or the quality analysts, they work closely with the users, actual users, to perform the UAT, and where all these features is validated by the end users, or maybe they also sometimes call the different stakeholders, right? So this is done as a part of UAT. Now comes the other important thing is that the deployment planning. Now the developers collaborate with the DevOps or the release engineers to plan the deployment process to the production. Now this include scheduling a deployment window, preparing the deployment script, and also consider the rollback procedure in case of any issues that will happen during the deployment. This again is an important aspect, and I'm going to describe this in detail later on. Now what will happen after this, we will actually going to deploy to the production. So during the scheduled deployment window, right, so we will have our window. Mostly we do this in weekends when most of the users are not working. So during this scheduled deployment window, the changes are pushed to the production environment. Now, this may involve deploying the code, the database schema changes, the configuration updates, and any important or necessary components, right? So this will happen during the deployment. After the deployment, right? After the deployment, the developers closely monitor the production system for any issues or performance problems. So if any issues come, they quickly address and try to resolve it. Now, after this, we have something called release validation. Now, developers and the team validate that the new features are working as expected in the production environment, and there are no adverse effect or no any other regressions has been done. So that is the validation part. And then of course developers also update documentation. They create release notes and they share the knowledge about the changes with the team and the relevant stakeholders. So all these changes has been communicated across the organization, whatever whoever is going to use those particular features or component, right? So after that, we have something called post-release support. Now, again, it varies from organization to organization, but it sometimes it's 4 weeks, sometimes it's 6 weeks, sometimes it's 3 months. Again, it depend on how major or minor releases we put into the production, right? So developers provide post-release support. They address any issues or bugs that may come after the release, right? So this is the how developer will work. Now the question is, what if there is a issue while doing a deployment to the production? Now if you someone is going to ask you this question on release management, right, definitely you should know that what will happen if there is an issue, if anything happen while deployment to the production. So there is something called a rollback plan. Now this uh, what is this rollback plan? So basically a rollback plan should be prepared first of all in advance as a part of deployment planning process, and it should not be created on the fly, when some issue will happen during the deployment. I mean, again, I've seen in few teams that they just create something during the deployment when some issue will happen. So that's something which as a scrum master you will make sure that always a rollback plan should be there, whenever you are doing anything into the production. Now what will happen in this? So first of all, before any deployment to the production, right? So we will define a rollback plan that should be prepared as a part of your overall deployment plan or a release plan. Now, this plan have any specific steps to be taken in case any issue are encountered during or after the deployment. Those are the steps which is written over there. Now, when the issue or problem are detected during the deployment or shortly after, so for example, there are application crash or some performance degradation happen or some critical bug, even P2 kind of bugs issue arises. So the team decide to initiate the previously prepared rollback plan in those cases. So what we'll do after that, when we have some major issue, we just halt the deployment. So we stop the deployment process immediately. So this may involve stopping or halting the release pipeline or rolling back the deployment of a specific component. Now we will quickly try to identify the cause, like what is the root cause of this issue. This may involve developers, they analyze different logs or error messages or any available monitoring data. So they try to find out the reason that okay, why it's happening. Now how we're going to execute, we will refer to our pre-prepared rollback plan, and we execute the defined steps to revert to the previous stable version of the application, right? So the word is previous stable version. So it may have things, for example, reverting the code base or rolling back the database changes or restoring the configuration settings. So all these are the technical terms, but if you know them, that's pretty good. It definitely going to showcase to the interviewer that you are actually working on some uh, IT project, right? Most of the time we don't know that, okay, what our developers are doing anyway. So after that, if there was data migration or data synchronization activities as a part of deployment, so we have to reverse those changes as well as defined in the rollback plan. So again, it's a not a mandatory thing, but if applicable, sometimes if we are doing some sort of data migration. Now, before making the application or system live again, even after the rollback, right, still we will do a testing. So we will perform a thorough testing to ensure that the rollback process has been successful and all the application is into the stable state. So that's again an important thing. Okay, after that, we as a team, we as a you as a scrum master, you have to keep stakeholders that can have your users, your customers. You have to inform about the issue and the rollback process, like, okay, why it's happened, what you have done so far, right? And then you should provide the update or whatever the progress which you are making so far. And you have to also tell the estimated downtime, that okay, due to this thing is, I mean, we will going to shut down the system for, let's say, for more 1 hour or 2 hour or whatever, right? So all those details should be there in your communication. And after the rollback is complete, you will again conduct the additional testing to ensure that the system is fully functional and the issue has been resolved. So this is again going to happen. Now, though I have mentioned that while doing all these things, right, maybe we'll able to identify issue, maybe the reason, maybe which we have identified that time, maybe we just give them a very small reason, right? But the detailed root cause analysis has to be there, right? So after the situation is stabilized, you will conduct a thorough post-mortem analysis to identify the root cause of the issue. And of course that will be go in your database, in your repository, that okay, why this has happened and how we can prevent them. So this will help to prevent the similar issues in the future. So this is something which we should consider. And once the application or system is confirmed to the stable and free from any other further issues, right? So the normal operations, and you will inform the stakeholders, that the system is back to its previous state. So all those things you will do as a scrum master. You will definitely going to work with your team, be there at least, that okay, if something wrong will happen, so it's not their fault, right? We as a team should take the I would say, not the word blame, but responsibility of that failure as well, right? So that's something which you should do as a scrum master. So now let me check with you if you have any questions for me. Just give me a minute.